implementation of the Integrated Customs Management System, ICUMS, which has portended a duplication of external price databases and research services provided by SML. That utilizing ICUMS capabilities for external price verification, the services provided by SML should be reassessed to optimize efficiency and adapt to evolving business dynamics. And in respect of downstream petroleum audit, based on the reckoning that SML had gained 4 years experience and had become more proficient, the contract price should be renegotiated, including consideration of shifting from a variable to a fixed fee structure. And finally, in respect of this matter, KPMG said consideration should be given to incorporating periodic monitoring and evaluation at least every 2 years to formally assess the performance of the components of the contract and related key performance indicators. Now, the OSP full investigation. Upon the conclusion of preliminary investigation, and upon the reckoning that the facts and circumstances of the case reasonably indicated that an investigation may be conducted to prevent or prosecute corruption or corruption-related offenses, especially in light of the KPMG report, which the OSP incorporated into its preliminary investigation, the special prosecutor, in pursuance of his mandate, assigned the case to authorized officers of the OSP for a full investigation. Our review of the KPMG report firmed up our opening of a full investigation on 3 main grounds. First, the major factual findings in the KPMG report tallied with our preliminary findings. Second, the KPMG report, much like our preliminary investigation, turned up more critical questions than answers, which required further investigation. Third, the KPMG audit's work and outcome differed significantly from the OSP investigation and likely outcome. Members of the press, while KPMG rightly identified the overall objective of its assignment as reviewing the work and activities of SML in relation to the contracts with the state and assessing the propriety of procurement and contracting processes as well as the appropriateness of cost-value analysis in the performance of the contracts, the OSP's work in this case is a criminal corruption and corruption-related investigation of not just assessing the propriety and appropriateness of acts and activities in the context of the SML contracts, but also examining the criminal culpability or otherwise of implicated persons, which is wider in scope and outlook than the audit work of KPMG. Then again, while the OSP's preliminary findings accorded with the major actual findings in the KPMG report, the OSP found itself unable to agree with some major conclusions drawn by KPMG, especially in respect of accountability and value for money. The OSP investigation was concluded on 3 October 2025 after extensive surveillance, comprehensive review, and analysis of hundreds of relevant and related documents at MOF, GRA, and PPA, and digital and electronic review and analysis of thousands of relevant related documents and computer servers and hard drive components retrieved from 2 premises of SML at Osu in Accra and in Tema, and assets of SML at relevant depots, and the discovery and validation of electronic communication among the persons of interest, especially as a good number of the public officers involved did not use their official email addresses. The OSP conducted comprehensive interviews of 31 persons of interest in respect of the investigation. The identities of the interviewees are disclosed where necessary. The OSP collaborated with several public institutions, including the Ministry of Finance, Ghana Revenue Authority, National Security Secretariat, Ghana Police Service, National Intelligence Bureau, National Signals Bureau, Financial Intelligence Center, National Petroleum Authority, Petroleum Commission, Public Procurement Authority, and Office of the Registrar of Companies. The OSP also collaborated with several financial institutions. In augmentation of the expertise and skill of the authorized officers of the OSP, the office also relied on expert opinion of persons in the revenue assurance setup in transaction audit, external price verification, measurement audit of downstream petroleum, upstream petroleum audit, and measurement audit in the mineral sector. KPMG officers also assisted the OSP in the verification of their own analysis and conclusions. the OSP investigation establishes the following. 1. There was no genuine need for contracting SML for the obligations it purported to perform, and that the contracts were secured for SML through self-serving official patronage, sponsorship, and promotion based on false and unverified claims. 2. The SML contracts were attended by egregious statutory breaches, as mandatory prior approvals were wantonly disregarded by relevant officials who acted with increased and emboldened impunity. 3. There was no established financial management system of monitoring and verification to ensure that the Republic was obtaining the value for the money it was paying to SML, and that the payment channels to SML were set on automatic mode, detached from actual performance, causing financial loss to the public. Members of the press, investigation outcomes are based on the following events and analysis. The genesis. On 27 January 2017, Kenneth Nanaya Oforiatta assumed office as the Minister of Finance of Ghana. He would serve in this position till 14 February 2024. Barely 3 weeks after Mr. Oforiatta's assumption of office, SMEL was incorporated, that is Strategic Monitoring, with the full name, Strategic Mobilization Entrepreneurship Limited. That was how it was incorporated first, SMEL, on 14 February 2017 by a timber merchant, Evans Edusei, with the company's stated principal activities as general trading and services and import and export of general goods. A little over 4 months after its incorporation, this company that had stated its services are trading services and import and export of general goods was presented to the PPA by the Commissioner General of the GRA, Emmanuel Kofinti, seeking approval to sole source SMEL as a service provider for enhanced classification, valuation, and risk management platform in the customs setup. These events, the assumption of office by Mr. Oforiatta, the incorporation of SMEL by Mr. Edusei, and the application for sole sourcing of SMEL by Mr. seemed unrelated at first glance. However, a closer look at subsequent events from June 2017 to 14 February 2024, when Mr. Oforiatta's tenure ended, show a tightly knit and non-coincidental association of the prior identified events as the precursors of a masterful and mischievously crafted scheme designed by Mr. Oforiatta immediately upon assumption of office and throughout his tenure as the chief promoter, patron, and sponsor of the company, and the previously unseen power that unlawfully force-fed the company into the revenue assurance drive of GRA through a series of reckless decision-making and management and flagrant violation of statute through the use of public office for profit, contrary to Section 179C of the Criminal Offences Act 1960, Act 29, and by directly and indirectly influencing the procurement process to obtain an unfair advantage in the award of procurement contracts to the company, contrary to Section 92(2)(b) of the Public Procurement Act 2003, Act 663, with the pliant and avaricious and questioning compliance of 2 successive GRA Commissioner Generals, who he kept at a slavish subservience, leading to colossal financial loss to the Republic. By December 2024, SML had been paid a total amount of 1,436,249,828 cedis, 53 pesos. The OSP investigation also showed that the company was incorporated for the sole purpose of employing it as a vehicle to ride on official patronage and sponsorship, erected on false and contrived acclaim and attributes for the award of public procurement contracts in the revenue assurance setup. The SMEL period. First application by GRA to PPA. By a letter dated 16 June 2017, Mr. Inti, then as Acting Commissioner General of GRA, requested PPA for approval to engage SMEL through single source procurement under Section 40A and B of the Public Procurement Act for enhanced classification, valuation, and risk management in the context of the payment of duties and levies on imported goods. The request stated that there were incidents of same goods given different classification and duties, which were giving rise to challenges and undue delays at the ports of clearance, and that SMEL would address these challenges faced by GRA to allow for full, smoother, and better services in the customs processes and procedures. The request touted SMEL as having particular interest in providing effective and measurable solutions for the enhancement of government revenue, and that SMEL also enjoyed financial and technological backing from its investors, one of which was Cotecna SA, described as a multinational company well versed in the business of inspection, testing, certification, and the provision of tailor-made information technology solutions. The request further stated that though Cotecna SA had given SMEL the right of ownership, Cotecna SA would provide, implement, and maintain a comprehensive information technology platform that includes its proprietary systems for classification and valuation known as ValueQuest and Executive Reporting System ERS, and that these solutions would ensure full integration with the systems in the customs chain at the time to further enhance the purpose of the exchange of information between the systems. The request was most irregular and perplexing. It was simply unfathomable that a company which commenced business on 14 February 2017 would have attained the experience and track record that was advertised in the request by Mr. Nti, dated 16 June 2017, for the nature of the proposed assignment. SMEL did not possess the experience and know-how to engage in revenue assurance services on behalf of the Republic. That much was clear. And this obvious incredulity, which must have been prevailing on the mind of Mr. Nti, triggered an internal conflict in his own request, as Mr. Nti then promptly referred to the financial and technological backing of the supposed investors of SMEL. And from then on, the 16 June 2017 letter no longer sounded as a request to sole source SMEL, but a pseudo request to sole source Cotecna SA, a supposed investor of SMEL. The copious reference by Mr. Nti to Cotecna SA and its notable technological acclaim was merely a ruse to divert attention from the glaring incapacity of SMEL in an attempt to directly influence the procurement process to obtain an unfair advantage for SMEL, notwithstanding its lack of experience and technological capability. Indeed, GRA failed to submit any evidence of a partnership or investment agreement between SMEL and Cotecna SA. The request merely attached the profiles of the two entities and a letter of intent from Cotecna SA. Further, nothing in Section 40 of the Public Procurement Act, which governs single-source procurement, operated in favor of the attempt to sole source SMEL to engage in revenue assurance on behalf of the Republic. Therefore, it came as no surprise that by a letter dated 4 July 2017, PPA communicated its disapproval of the 16 June 2017 request by GRA. PPA was emphatic that SML had no proven experience in the business it sought to undertake. Further, PPA stated that the letter of intent by Cotecna SA did not establish any legally binding relationship between SMEL and Cotecna for the provision of the service, and that the company seeking to be considered for a contract must demonstrate an appreciable capacity and strength of its own, and possibly subcontract a portion to a qualified subcontractor or agent, which was absent in the case. Second application by GRA to PPA. Then followed a second and stranger and more perplexing request by Mr. Nti, still as Acting Commissioner General of GR, to PPA by a letter dated 1 August 2017, by which GRA applied for approval to sole source SMEL, and this time with Ghana Link. Cotecna was still in the picture somewhere. The request recited that SMEL had acquired a software for the classification, valuation, and risk management, that is CVRM platform, from Cotecna SA, and that SMEL had agreed to enter into a partnership with Ghana Link, a renowned local inspection and verification service provider, to provide the necessary support services for the implementation of the platform for GRA. A request further stated that in the partnership agreement, SMEL will provide a CVRM platform, while Ghana Link will provide external verification services using an appropriate platform, and that Ghana Link would also provide monitoring and supervision of customs valuation to ensure that the appropriate values were applied. The tone and tenor of the content of his own application should have portended pause and reflection on the part of Mr. Nti. In effect, he was stating that SMEL did not possess the requisite experience and track record, and no appreciable capacity and strength of his own. Yet, he was actively urging SMEL on PPA for approval merely 6 weeks after the PPA disapproval on the same ground. This was not reasonable persistence. It was a deliberate attempt to manipulate the procurement process, introduce a redundant private actor, and distort the facts and create a backdoor entry for SMEL into Ghana's revenue assurance architecture. This time, PPA did not even bother to respond, as the circumstances surrounding SMEL's lack of capacity and track record had not changed from the time of the rejection of the first application. Even more troubling was the fact that these CVRMs were being carried out by customs officers through the National Single Window Platform. Excuse me. Mr. Nti did not relent. He repeated a second application to PPA. Seeing that PPA had not responded to the second GRA application 6 weeks after the request was transmitted, and the powerful behind-the-curtain chief promoter, patron, and sponsor of SMEL, Mr. Friata, was insistent on pushing the company into revenue assurance space through Mr. Nti. Mr. Nti repeated the second application by GRA to PPA for the sole sourcing of SMEL and Ghana Link by a letter dated 14 September 2017, which was almost word for word with the 1 August 2017 request. PPA certainly had had enough by this time, and it responded by a letter dated 29 September 2017 and rejected the second repeated GRA request. PPA forcefully stated that SMEL has still not shown any proven capacity in terms of experience and provision of similar assignments intended to be undertaken under the proposed joint venture agreement with Ghana Link. PPA also noted that the relationship between SMEL and Ghana Link did not provide the needed joint capacity to undertake the assignment, since SMEL would not be responsible for the bulk of the assignment by GRA's requirements. PPA signed off by stating that the reapplication by GRA did not address SMEL's lack of capacity in respect of the assignment. PPA did right in our estimation on all accounts on this matter up to this point. And with this, SMEL was blocked from the revenue assurance drive of GRA, or so it seemed. Now, SML. Following these setbacks, a simple but clever second plan was implemented to ensure that the company will certainly be awarded public procurement contracts for revenue assurance, come what may. On 22 November 2017, Strategic Mobilization Enhancement Limited, that was escaping me, SMEL, changed its name to Strategic Mobilization Ghana Limited, SML. Only the name changed. Everything else remained the same, including personnel and lack of expertise and capability. By a letter dated 30 November 2017, Mr. Eduse, the timber merchant, informed GRA of the name change while reserving the binding and full effect of all prior transactions. 7 months after the name change, GRA and MOF commenced the unlawful award to SML of a string of specialized revenue assurance public procurement contracts running into late 2023 in respect of transaction audits and external price verification, downstream petroleum, upstream petroleum, and the mineral sector. Contract for transaction audit services. After the name change from SMEL to SML, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of the company were actively looking for an opportunity to reintroduce the Real Christian company back into their design of awarding its public procurement contracts for revenue assurance, notwithstanding its lack of experience and capacity. the opportunity presented itself in the most unusual way through the enforced wresting of a public procurement contract from a company named West Blue Ghana Limited, through official accretional duress and browbeating. West Blue was incorporated in Ghana on 3 July 2012. It commenced business on 6 July 2012. Its core mandate, as stated in its object, is to facilitate trade reform and modernization programs with a particular focus on ICT implementation and management consultancy. By a contract dated 4 August 2015, the Government of Ghana, acting through GRA and MOF, contracted West Blue for the provision of National Single Window Integrated Risk Management, NSWIRM, which entailed the delivery, installation, and maintenance of the project to enable GRA undertake core classification, valuation, and risk management functions of the destination inspection companies which were exiting the sector by 1 September 2015. Through this contract, West Blue became central to Ghana's trade facilitation and customs automation reforms until the contract's termination at the end of 2018, after which it became involved in legal disputes over outstanding payments and retained equipment. Members of the media, unbeknownst to West Blue, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML were eyeing its contract and devising means to dislodge it from the revenue assurance space and hand it over to SML. And by a letter dated 21 September 2017, authored by a company named Ports and Customs World Ghana Limited and addressed to the Minister of Finance, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML saw an opening, and they promptly took it. By the 21 September 2017 letter, Ports and Customs World Ghana Limited informed MOF that it was to purchase and take over shares in West Blue, and that it was committed to renegotiating the terms of the West Blue contract dated 4 August 2015 with a more competitive price and improved technology. Citing value for money audit by Crown Agents Ghana Limited on the West Blue contract, which recommended the option of renegotiation of the contract to give GOG better value for money, MOF responded to Ports and Customs World Ghana Limited with deadly effect. By a letter dated 25 January 2018, MOF stated that it would terminate the West Blue contract on 31 December 2018. However, before the indicated termination, it was going to reduce its contract price. How a cited recommended option of a renegotiation of the contract was drastically elevated to termination of the contract can only be explained by one hypothesis: that the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML were setting the tone for the unlawful substitution of West Blue with SML without the required statutory prior approvals, and also that the reduction of the contract price payable to West Blue was not a cost-saving measure in the least, but a design with the sole purpose of withering it down, stifling it, and handing its contract over to SML. The public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML knew they could not simply replace West Blue with SML before the indicated termination date of 31 December 2018 of the West Blue contract because of contractual obligations. And more pressing was the reckoning that SML's involvement would trigger the requirement of mandatory prior statutory approvals. Indeed, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML dared not return to PPA at this time with a request for approval of SML's involvement, since the only thing that had changed about the company since the 29 September 2017 rejection by PPA was just the company's name. Therefore, these public actors of SML decided to place SML on the lap of West Blue and did in fact force SML on West Blue as its supposed subcontractor on the West Blue contract without the mandatory prior statutory approvals. Thus, the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML commenced participation in a series of outright criminal conduct by knowingly disregarding and breaching criminal prohibitions backed by a sense of impunity, as they view themselves as all too powerful. First, by a contract dated 1 June 2018, entitled Transaction Audit Services Agreement, and with the parties as GRA, West Blue, and SML, the company, which was rightfully characterized by PPA as having no proven capacity in terms of experience and provision of similar assignments in the sector, was introduced as a supposed subcontractor of West Blue. The recitals of the contract stated that SML desired to perform and West Blue desired to have SML perform transaction audit services for and on behalf of West Blue in respect of the latter's contract for the implementation of the National Single Window Project, and that GRA had agreed to pay for the services of SML. The 1 June 2018 agreement was certainly not a result of West Blue's initiative, and its conduct after the execution of the contract showed that it did not welcome SML as its supposed contractor. Indeed, it was openly opposed to SML acting as its supposed subcontractor. This was not a case of one private entity subcontracting another private entity to carry out specialized services for it in respect of a public procurement contract. This was a forced peel away of West Blue's mandate under the 4 August 2015 contract and an unlawful donation of the cutout mandate to SML by the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML. Under the 1 June 2018 agreement, West Blue was not the client of SML. GRA was the client of SML, and it had the obligation to pay SML. SML's invoices for payment were to be submitted not through West Blue, but directly to GRA. The only contractual obligation placed on GRA was that it should pay SML's fees directly to SML. West Blue had no compensation obligation to SML, its supposed subcontractor. Indeed, to all practical and legal purposes, SML was not performing any services for West Blue. SML's purported services were directly for GRA and not indirectly through West Blue. The specific contractual involvement of GRA in this at once clever and not so clever arrangement rendered it a sole source public procurement contract which required prior PPA approval. However, PPA's prior approval was neither sought for nor obtained for this contract. This unlawfulness was perpetrated with the full knowledge and involvement of the Minister of Finance. The duration of the 1 June 2018 agreement was tied with the termination date of West Blue's mother contract. The contract required SML to provide transaction audit services of CCVRs generated and issued at the pre-arrival processing phase of the implementation of the National Single Window Project. Upon completion of the audit and the statement of its findings, SML was required to then forward the transaction audit reports together with all relevant attachments to the Customs Post-Clearance Audit (PCA) officer through data exchange protocols agreed with West Blue. The Customs PCA officer was then required to review the transaction audit reports and either accept or reject them. In fairness, it did sound like a contractor and subcontractor relationship on paper, under which the subcontractor was expected to apply skill, expertise, and tools. However, the reality was starkly different. SML did not provide any such skill, expertise, and tools under the contract. It merely sat on the skill, expertise, and tools of West Blue in a pretend posturing sham of delivering transaction audit services for the Republic. It became painfully clear a little over a month after the signing of the 1 June 2018 contract that SML had no skill, expertise, and tools of its own, and that West Blue had been forced into an unwanted marriage, which required it to shoulder the assumed primary obligations of SML. It was as if West Blue was rather the subcontractor for SML, as it was now being required to work for SML. By mid-July 2018, the tenuous and artificial relationship between West Blue and SML was falling apart, and by November 2018, the enforced partnership had collapsed, evidenced by a series of letters and emails exchanged between the two entities. SML, on its part, was perpetually vexed by West Blue's apparent stance of ignoring the former's repeated requests for information. West Blue, on the other hand, was registering its consternation at the forced marriage by supplying little or no information to SML in a silent protest of a demonstration that SML's participation was needless and downright odious, and that it had no skill, expertise, and tools of its own to function. These events forcefully establish that the public official, promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML compelled West Blue to take on SML as a purported subcontractor, notwithstanding repeated rejections by PPA for lack of capacity, coupled with the absence of demonstrated operational need. The recurring and unhappy friction between West Blue and SML underscores the fact that the former neither sought for nor welcomed the latter's involvement in its contractual dealings with the public, and that SML's entry unnecessarily disrupted the system of transaction audit and created an added layer of wasteful inefficiency in the sector. On 31 December 2018, and this date is very crucial, the 4 August 2015 West Blue contract for the provision of a national single window integrated risk management for the classification, valuation, and risk management in respect of imported goods terminated. So from 31st December 2018, West Blue had run out of a contract. On the same day, the 1 June 2018 Transaction Audit Services Agreement involving SML as the supposed contractor to West Blue under the latter's 4 August 2015 also terminated, since it was sitting on West Blue's mother contract. Upon the termination of the mother contract and its offshoot so-called subcontract on 31 December 2018, any reasonable person would have thought that if the public official, promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML were not criminally minded and were not engaged in criminality and were not intending to engage further in criminality, they would have naturally rolled out SML from the GRA revenue assurance drive and properly and lawfully given it an above-the-table chance in competition with like-minded entities. However, intending to further perpetrate criminality and to profit from same, they purported to extend SML's engagement without the subsistence of the mother West Blue contract. Later, they then purported to unlawfully include West Blue in the extended service when they faced the formidable challenge of the obvious, which is that SML could not operate without the expertise of West Blue, and that SML's participation could only be justified by them if that participation rode on the back of West Blue. Extension of contract for transaction audit services. The events commencing from 1 January 2019, after the 31 December 2018 expiration of the two contracts, were most troubling, as the public official, promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML doubled down on their criminal conduct with an enhanced sense of impunity. By a contract titled Contract Extension and dated 1 January 2019 and signed between GRA and SML, the public official, promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML purported to extend the 1 June 2018 contract involving GRA, West Blue, and SML for a month with the same terms and conditions in favor of SML. The striking feature of the contract extension was that it was executed without a corresponding renewal of West Blue's mother contract upon which that contract sat and upon which this new extension should have sat. The effect was that the contract extension sat on nothing, factually and legally. It stood alone in abject illegality and criminality without approval by PPA. Thus, on 1 January 2019, the public official, promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML finally reached their intended and eventual goal, commenced in 2017, of their forcible entry of SML into the revenue assurance drive of GRA, with the successful dislodgement of West Blue and the donation of his contract to SML. Further, by not stipulating the specific duration of the contract, the public official, promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML handed the company a potentially perpetual contract and thereby sought unsuccessfully to avoid the statutory requirement under Section 33(1) of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921, that provides a covered entity such as GRA should not enter into any agreement with a financial commitment that binds the government for more than one financial year, or that results in a contingent liability, as was the outlook of the contract, except where the financial commitment or the contingent liability is with the prior written approval of the Minister of Finance and authorized by Parliament in accordance with Article 181 of the Constitution. No sooner had this unlawful feat been attained, then critical problems commenced their attendance on the new arrangement. SML still did not possess the skill, expertise, and tools to engage in transaction audit services, and it lacked a functioning system to receive and process CCVRs. And West Blue, upon whose tools and expertise SML relied to purport to perform the services, had been kicked out and was without a contract. Therefore, the public official promoters of SML decided on a short-lived but brutal course of bullying West Blue further into submission to hand over its work to SML when West Blue had no contract no longer with the state. By a letter dated 10 January 2019, the Commissioner of the Customs Division of GRA, Isaac Crensel, directed West Blue to cause the transfer of the transaction audit services for the top 20 imports to SML with effect from 11 January 2019. For added measure, Mr. Crensel threw in a threat that if West Blue failed to cause the transfer, it will not be paid its outstanding fees for December 2018, and thereafter, for any month in which it failed to comply with the directive, forgetting that West Blue had exited the service and it no longer had a contract with the Republic. In that same letter, Mr. Crensel advised SML to position itself by taking the necessary steps to take over the transaction audit services for the top 20 imports from West Blue. This letter was copied to the Minister of Finance, the Commissioner General of GRA, and the Chief Executive of SML. Then, by a letter dated 15 January 2019, West Blue responded to the directive by pointing out the obvious, that the 1 June 2018 arrangement between GRA, West Blue, and SML had expired on 31 December 2018. Nonetheless, it explained that it had been submitting the required information to SML, but that it encountered some challenges in the last quarter of 2018. This letter was also copied to the Minister of Finance, the Commissioner General of GRA, and the Chief Executive of SML. However, on the same day, and reeling under the intense bullying of the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML, and faced with the open threats by Mr. Crensel of the non-payment of his outstanding December 2018 fees should it fail to comply with the directive, West Blue handed over the transaction audit services for the top 20 imports between October and December 2018 to SML, not through any established system, but this time on a universal serial bus, USB drive. Upon receipt of West Blue's 15 January 2019 response, the public sponsors of SML upped their unlawful conduct. By a letter dated 23 January 2019 and addressed to the Chief Executive of West Blue, Mr. Crensel stated that though West Blue's contract with SML had expired on 31 December, he was advising West Blue to proceed under the same terms and effectively collaborate with SML until further notice. This letter was also copied to the Minister of Finance, the Commissioner General of GRA, and the Chief Executive of SML. This directive, dressed by way of an advice, blurred all good sense and the exercise of lawful authority. In effect, Mr. Crensel, by the 23 January 2019 letter, was seeking to effectively resurrect the expired 1 June 2018 contract involving GRA, West Blue, and SML. And by necessary extension, the terminated West Blue mother contract of 4 August 2015 to the benefit of the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML. Our conclusion becomes even more telling on the consideration that upon retirement as the Commissioner of the Customs Division of GRA, Mr. Crensel took up appointment as the General Manager of SML, coloring his actions while in office as an inducement for future reward of a retirement benefit and use of public office for private benefit. Contract for additional services, external verification. The public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML then proceeded to firmly entrench the company in the public revenue assurance space by once again mounting another contract upon a contract which was itself based on nothing. So by a contract dated 1 April 2019 between GRA and SML, recited as made pursuant to the 1 January 2019 contract extension, GRA appointed SML to provide external services to Customs Technical Services Bureau, CTSB. This contract was reckless by all accounts, as it was executed and implemented at a time when SML still did not possess the capacity, experience, and expertise to perform the services it was originally engaged to deliver. It beats the imagination then that the public official promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML added on additional services in respect of which the company had absolutely no skill, expertise, experience, and capacity. It was a case of more money for no work, and much like the 1 January 2019 contract, the 1 April 2019 contract was bedeviled by all the unlawfulness of the absence of statutory prior approvals by PPA and Parliament. Now, having estimated that SML had been cleaned up enough to gain acceptance by July 2019, the chief public official promoter, sponsor, and patron of SML, Mr. Oforiatta, commends a more direct involvement in the company's activities and interface with public institutions to secure more public contracts for the company, and also to ensure that its path to that attainment was well cleared and smoothened. On the instructions of Mr. Oforiatta, the technical advisor ICT at MOF, by an email dated 16 July 2019, invited the controlling mind of West Blue to a meeting with Mr. Oforiatta at the boardroom of the Minister of Finance, slated for 17 July 2019. On 17 July 2019, Mr. Oforiatta hosted SML and West Blue in his office, and at that meeting it was resolved that West Blue should reactivate its web service to SML by transmitting all CCVR data in respect of January to June 2019. Now, during all this period, Mr. Oforiatta's increased participation in personally promoting the cause of SML had become pronounced. On 29 August 2019, he directed his technical advisor through his chef de cabinet, Mr. Enesakori, to lead the integration of West Blue and SML alongside the new leadership of the Customs Technical Services Bureau. Mr. Oforiatta was being copied in every email chain, and this is highly significant because as Minister of Finance, he was placed in direct knowledge of SML's operational and tool incapacity, and that it was hardly performing any service to deserve the payment of fees. Had he not been personally benefiting from SML's unlawfully procured contracts, the open display by SML of lack of capacity, expertise, and tools would have immediately triggered his intervention to halt payments to SML and demand accountability. Instead, he looked on conspiratorially in silence, while endorsing and approving payments to SML from the Consolidated Fund, Petroleum Revenue Account, and Tax Refund Account, with no technical or operational basis. The OSP investigation shows that all the troubleshooting displayed during this period was born of the unlawful imposition of SML in the space and the still lingering reality of SML's lack of capacity to carry out transaction audits and external price verification, 15 months after its engagement. The company had no system in place to receive CCVRs, while West Blue was under no legal obligation to release the vital data to it. As a result, the work went undone until SML continued, and it went undone, yet SML continued to be paid. It is highly worrisome that though SML were doing practically nothing by way of transaction audit and external price verification, GRA kept authorizing steady payments to the company. The OSP investigation shows that the 1 June 2018 contract involving GRA, West Blue, and SML, the 1 January 2019 contract extension between GRA and SML, and the 1 April 2019 contract for additional services between GRA and SML were of no real benefit to the Republic and an unnecessary drain on the public purse. Indeed, all the way into May 2021, SML was displaying its incapacity by seeking integration into the transaction audit and external price verification systems by 2 requests, one dated 12 May 2021 and 15 May 2021. At this point, on 20 September 2019, MOF by a press release, announced that Mr. Nti would retire, and along came in a Reverend Amishadai Owusu Amwa. Consolidation of services agreement, transaction audit, and external verification services. I'm winding down a bit. This is important. From October 2019, the public official, promoters, sponsors, and patrons of SML enhanced the unlawful conduct to a frightening degree. On 3 October 2019, 2 agreements were signed. GRA and SML signed a contract for the consolidation of transaction audit services and external verification services. The previous standalone contracts, which were masqueraded as piecemeal and of very short durations, were merged and enhanced with a duration of 5 years with the option of renewal. The OSP investigation shows that SML did not submit a single invoice in respect of this contract and under its predecessor standalone contracts. In addition, SML did not transmit the required reports to the CTSB and PCA officers. Nonetheless, GRA kept a constant stream of automatic payments to SML under this contract and under its predecessor standalone contracts. Consequently, the unlawful strategic investiture of SML in the public revenue assurance space became a windfall of automatic payments detached from the performance of actual work and without monitoring and verification. On the same day, the second contract was signed with SML for the measurement audit of downstream petroleum products. And on the same day, that having regard to the expertise of SML in providing transaction audit service, the services being rendered by SML to GRA was being extended to operations within the downstream petroleum sector. Upon this official falsehood, SML was handed another contract to undertake a comprehensive review of workflow and operations within the downstream uploading and offloading points. The OSP investigation shows that the contract for measurement audit of downstream petroleum products was an unnecessary parallel layer, since the service was already being performed satisfactorily by NPA, that's the National Petroleum Authority, and customs officials. Also, SML's measuring system was unsuitable for measurements at several depots, rendering its services of no import in respect of those depots. NPA was quite concerned, and it promptly anticipated the clear and present danger of duplication. However, the official promoters of SML were not interested in whatever measures NPA, as the state regulator in the industry, had instituted or was about to institute. The multi-term of 5 years duration of these contracts also bound the government to financial commitments for more than a year and resulted in the contingent liability, and also triggered the requirement for ministerial approval and authorization by Parliament. The OSP investigation did not uncover a prior written approval by the Minister of Finance of the 3 October 2019 contracts. However, Mr. Oforiate's involvement in the procurement of the contracts by his actions show that he firmly approved of the contracts, even if not in writing. Excuse me.